Hello everyone, this is yet another episode of Career Talks by Welcome Solutions, and in these meetings we talk with professionals with interesting career paths who can teach us a little bit about how to find yourself a cool job on the basis of their own story. Grant advisory, how cool can that be? Well, we all have something to do with grant writing. As academics, we had the chance to at least once during our careers write a personal grant proposal, and most of us don't really enjoy the process. However, as it turns out, grant advisory can be a career path. But is it hot or not? Can it be an interesting job that gives a lot of career opportunities? Well, let's find out. Thank you so much, Irina, for joining us today. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and we will be most happy to hear your story from your own perspective.
Thank you for inviting me here, Natalia, and I hope that my story can be interesting for some of you who is now currently looking for where to go, how to proceed after their PhDs. So I did my PhD in Nijmegen in the Netherlands, and I came there from Moscow, where I grew up and studied biology. So shortly after my master's, I moved, and my first position was as a research assistant at the Max Planck Institute for Psycholinguistics within the neurobiology of language group. And a year later, I started PhD. We looked at the semantic memory and how do we recognize objects and how do we integrate different multisensory signals in order to create a coherent representation of an object in the brain. And the practical side of that project was to see if we can decode representations from brain signals from EEG and fMRI. And that project was really interesting. I spent 4 years with it, and it was back 10 years ago when the study of decoding the brain just started. So that was really exciting, and we got some nice papers published. And after that, I stayed for 5 more years at the Donders Institute. I did a postdoc there. It was a long postdoc contract, also with some administrative role. I coordinated a work package of a big funded project. So after those 5 years of postdoc, I physically moved out from Nijmegen, and I also was not sure anymore what I want to do. And I guess that's why I'm here, because when you look at the career path of other people, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, or when you just look at someone's CV, it often looks very smooth and impressive. But I think, in fact, all of us go through these moments of uncertainty and doubt, and where we have to make choices, especially if you are not from Europe, if your work choice is also linked to your choice where to live and whether you will have residence permit and all those very practical considerations, especially if you also have family to look after. Yeah, that can be very, very tough. And I think that was my first message, that this is okay, actually, that I think everyone has those moments and it's just fine. And it's very good if you have a possibility to take some time and really think very well what you want to do next. So for me, that also coincided with the fact that I started to teach yoga. I did yoga teacher training, and I first did it as a hobby. I started to teach for a small group of students at the Donders Institute. For a while, I gave classes at the Radboud Student Church. It was just donation-based classes, and all the revenue went to a charity. That I really enjoyed that time of life. Then I also gave classes in a studio. So slowly it started to grow. And I realized that I want to keep that. So I really want that to become a part of my life. I also enjoyed all the people, friendships, this completely different world of yoga students, yoga teachers. It's very different from research world. And I liked it. So my intention was to keep that as part of my professional life as well. And I also started to explore how to link this with research. I talked to people who did research on mindfulness meditation. I attended several conferences, did some courses on the neurobiology of meditation, on contemplative science. And I discovered also that it is a very interesting research field, but I also realized that it's not, I don't want to do research in this field. It's just, I really don't want to do research anymore myself. So it was also it was not easy to accept that I just don't want to be a researcher anymore. And I don't want to follow this standard academic path, to fight for a tenure position and do all these things that we have to do if we want to stay in research. And it took me some time to accept that and to come in terms with this realization. However, I also realized that I do want to stay in the research world, in academic world. After several months of doing, actually being a yoga teacher, I realized that I do want to have that connection. And then it came down to sitting down and writing up what I want to do, what I actually like, what I don't like to do, what I can do, what I can do well. And with this, having this structure really helped me to make a step forward. And that step was looking for a position in the grant advice world, in the research support world. And soon after, I got the job at the Vrije University in Amsterdam, which was really nice. I was a part of the grant office there. With a few more people, we were responsible for helping researchers within the university to obtain funding. And that means informing researchers about funding possibilities, helping them to navigate this world, reviewing grant proposals, organizing workshops and informational events for researchers. Yes, that kind of work. And I think today I want to talk a little bit more about the world of research support and grant advice, because I think for many people don't know about it, that it exists. And this world is actually very, very big, and it can be very interesting. And just a few weeks ago, I started a new job at the One Planet Research Center. I'm working there now as a grant officer, so my work is to attract public funding for projects within One Planet, but I literally started just a couple of weeks ago, so I don't think I should talk a lot about it because I am still learning and seeing what I'm actually doing in this position.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Irina, for your great story. And my first question for you would be, when you were thinking about your first job outside academia, except for your yoga activities, was grant writing your first line of choice? So did you consider also other options, or you actually decided early on this is going to be my next career?
No, I actually didn't know that it exists first. I looked at the medical writing, scientific writing, because I do like the writing part. I applied for several jobs in that world, more in I did some teaching jobs, but yeah, that was sort of partly within academia. of course, with those skills that I already had.
Okay, I understand. And could you tell us a little bit more about how this job looks like in practice? So how does your working week look like? And also we have a question from the audience, from Julia. The question is, do you work in teams in this job? So is it individual grant writing, or is it a teamwork?
Okay, thanks. Again, I will be talking about working as a grant advisor at the university. And usually you work in a team. For a big university, there would be a team of 3, 5, 10 people, depends, who together have to support researchers, and the roles could be divided by disciplines. So you might be helping researchers within your own discipline, and of course it is in certain sense easier when you can understand the content of this proposal. You might also focus more on personal grants versus consortium grants. And the world of grant advising, it is much bigger also than I had thought in the beginning. The type of works that you can do may range from, just informing researchers about what opportunities are there. And for that, of course, you have to know yourself. It takes time to learn. You need to know what opportunities are there at the regional level, for your particular province, even maybe for your city. You may know what opportunities are there at the national level. For the Netherlands, of course, there are several big funding agencies that play the major role there. And then what opportunities are there at the European or even international level. And for each of these funding opportunities, you need to know how it works and what is the procedure, what are the requirements, who can apply, who cannot apply, and all these little details. First of all, you accumulate all this information, and this is something that researchers often don't know, that they come to you with questions. The second thing you can do is actually review their proposals, just help researchers to structure and help to sell their ideas, to write it in the most effective way, to make sure that what they write is actually in line with the requirements of the funding agency. Mm-hmm. And to do that, you also need to know these requirements very well.
Right. Mm-hmm. Actually, then I have a question about that part. So I can imagine that being a grant advisor is a bit like being an advocate. You just want you want the best for your for the person you collaborate with. But like, what happens if you don't like the proposal? So did you also have that situations when someone was coming to you with a really, really crappy idea for a grant? And do you then discuss and really tell them what do you think about their idea, or that never happened to you?
Well, of course, again, it depends. So what I already said, I will come back to your question in a minute. So what I already said, at the university, you are mostly doing like informing people and reviewing. It also can be a little bit more advice on the strategy. For instance, if I see that this particular proposal, well, you don't have bad proposals in a sense that mostly you work with people who are already experienced researchers, they know what they're doing. But it can happen that people come with some ideas that does not fit this particular call. And then you may suggest a better fit. Or you may suggest, given the requirements of this particular call, you need to have more publications in order to have a chance there. So maybe you need to wait for 1 more year and try then, and then you have better chances. So this more strategic talk is also part of grant advice job. Yeah, and in this sense, you don't usually tell people that the idea is bad, especially because most of these people, it's not your discipline, and you don't know exactly, but you can give some strategic advice on how to make it better.
Okay, and so how does your week look like? Is it that you have some office hours when researchers can schedule appointments with you and meet you at your office, or how does this look like?
So for a university grant advice job, it is yeah, you have office hours. There are always some requests from researchers. This is like a non-stop. It's a service job, you know. You have a service line, and people ask questions, and you need to come back with answers in time. But then there are events that are organized. There are proposals with which you're working from day to day, and of course, some more work accumulates towards deadline, you know. And then there are more quiet times, more busy times.
Mm-hmm. And is it sorry. Actually, I have a little bit different question now. So there's a lot of PhDs who are who doubt whether this might be a right career path for them, mostly because they have that strong association with their job, and they really like this ownership of projects, and they fear that once they go like outside academic career track and towards a grant advisory, for instance, then they will lose this sense of ownership. And then my question is for you, was it easy for you to give up on this of the ownership part? So how do you feel about the fact that now now you are in this advisory role and you're helping other people with developing projects rather than developing your own projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I feel fine with it. I can also imagine that that it might not fit everyone. So once again, what I already told, so the world of grant advice and funding support is very diverse. So you can, we talk about the university job grant advice position, this will be mostly about informing researchers and doing reviews and giving strategic advice. If we go, you may also work as a grant advisor in a consultants agency, you know, and then it becomes, then I guess you have a little bit more ownership because you actually help people to develop an idea, from an idea to a proposal. You might help them to find collaborators. This actually can go all the way to business advice. You may help them to write and actually physically write the proposal. You may also help people, and that another type of grant advice, to make strategic decisions on their career. For instance, if you advise people on personal grants, it often comes with advice on where to go next with their research in general and with their, you know, choice of positions, which becomes more like coaching. And that also can be part of grant advice job. So I think indeed you lose ownership of research project, but it's still, you own your own work, and that is still there.
Okay, well, I mean, like I always wonder about this because I myself feel like I have very strong ownership of the projects. That's also why I started writing books, because then, you know, authorship is always there. And I know many people who have the same dilemma. They actually, this is their fear, that once they lose the sense of ownership, then they will also lose satisfaction from job. But I guess it's also something that you have to try sometimes and see if you enjoy it or not, because in those types of jobs, it might be that your name is not known like beyond the project, but you get a lot of satisfaction from people who work with you, and that's you get this validation from them, right? That you're doing a good job. So maybe you don't need this external validation then from.
Well, I guess you still get external validation, because for big research projects, for instance, if it's a consultancy agency, very often it's kind of known what consultants, what agency, what consultant was helping. And if you are good and you're successful in what you do, then your name is still known. It might be not on paper, but it is there. And you get feedback from researchers, even if it's not a consultancy agency. If you're working in a grant desk of a university, you get feedback from researchers, and if you're good in what you do, they know it. No.
Right.
Yeah.
And we have a question from Nivesh, which is how to get this type of job. What are the minimal requirements to start working as a grant advisor?
again, as I just said, like the world of grant advice and funding advice is really diverse and very broad. It is, and there are positions at the universities, and I think for most universities, at least in the Netherlands, these positions are now growing because people, we realize that researchers need a lot of support, and funding advice is just one of type of research support that everyone needs. Then there are positions in consultancy agencies. Then you may become a freelance advisor, and then there are all kind of positions between industry and scientific world that are also possible. So you just need to see which of these flavors you want to go for. But basically, PhD is often a requirement. Not always, though. You need to. There is no education for grant advisors currently. I guess there will be at some point. Now there is no course that prepares you to do this. Mm-hmm. So you need to like writing or reviewing or editing others' writing. So it's a lot of work with text. You need to be like notice little details, actually like to look into details and small requirements of calls and see how that relates to a piece of writing that is in front of you. So that is important. And further, I think the requirements would be different depending on for which particular job you go.
And in your own recruitment process, did it matter if, for instance, what types of grants you got before as a researcher? Like, did you use your former grants, successful grant proposals as a form of application, or that was not the subject to assessment?
Of course, it matters that you have experience with the grant system. You have to know how it works. Also, if you know it well from the researcher's perspective, that's good. Mm-hmm. I think it helps if you have experience with different types of grants. So not only, for instance, one particular national fund, but also European grants, and know how these regulations work, how coordination works. So if you know that part a little bit from the inside, that helps, of course. What I was told once also during one of my interviews is that it doesn't really matter if your applications were successful or not. Of course, it's good if you are able to show that you were successful in writing, that's of course really good and it helps. But actually having experience with writing a proposal or setting up a big consortium proposal, even if it's not successful at the end, that helps also for a position for applying for such a job.
And do you think it might also help to have some science communications experience, like write some scientific blog or other forms of like?
Yeah, I think that helps. Actually, for me, that helped. I have been writing a blog for over a year on a regular basis, and that helps because if you're doing this, you show that you actually like writing and you can put together a coherent piece of text. So that is important.
Yeah, that's great to know because I have a blog myself and I'm like, okay, one good reason to do this. Great. Okay, so like my question for you would be.
But can I add on this? It is also a communication job, and I think that's just the most important part of this job is communication, and that's even if you work in a grant office of a university, you do have to communicate to different researchers, starting at different levels, from PhD students to professors. And as you mentioned in the beginning, sometimes this communication is not very easy because you do have to give feedback, and it is possible that you are talking to a professor and you need to tell him that he needs to work more or she needs to work more on his or her proposal. So you need to be able to do this in a nice and respectful way and effective way. But of course, if you go for a consultant agency, then it's even more so about communication, because then you have to bring together different parties and be able to talk with different people at with their language, their level. So I think the most important part of this job is actually to be an effective communicator.
Okay, great. And so my next question would be, so what is your most and least favorite part of this job?
Well, again, I will be talking about the university grant advice. What I really enjoyed is actually working with researchers and reviewing proposals. It is, yeah, because I could, most of the time, you feel that you can improve something, you can help. And it is actually just interesting because you read really bright ideas and you just learn all the time. That is very interesting. Well, the list, well, I think I really like this job. So it's not that I had something that I really did not like. Of course, you get to answer same questions over and over again. I think had I worked there a little bit longer, that would become sometimes tiring, because yeah, but that's a very normal, I think, for any kind of service job.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to know a little bit more about how do these career paths actually look like? So for you, if you would like to get promoted or like, get farther in your grant advisory career, then what do you do? Like, what are your options?
So once again, you can do it within the university, or you can go for in a consultancy or freelance, and there would be, yeah, I guess they have different pro and cons, and also, yeah, and you can consider that as a promotion, or at least a shift or a change in a direction that you may like more. Within the university, well, you may shift towards a particular type of grant advice, for instance, being closer to a particular funding agency, and once you are a little bit more integrated with a particular funding agency, you also grow because your expertise of this funding tools is growing. So this is also a way to grow. And there are people who work, for instance, in collaboration with Brussels and the European Commission, and who are actually situated part-time in Brussels, part-time in the Netherlands, who work to bring this experience from European Commission to the universities here. I guess that also can be considered as a good growth.
Okay, and all right, so my next question would be a little bit different. So actually, I'm very curious about what do you think about this growing grant writing and grant advisory industry? Because at least here in Europe, we have indeed more and more bodies such as grant advisory centers at universities, but also these external independent consultancy companies. And this actually, on one hand, that gives opportunity for those who are not professional grant writers to still get helped and draft successful proposals. But at the same time, it's like a threshold, because you have to invest first or have good connections to be able to draft these proposals. And I have a feeling, there is a lot of European money in these like Horizon 2020 projects and all these like big, and when you look at the numbers, it's like billions of euros and really big plans. But I have a feeling that if you are a small company or a small lab without many resources, then the fact that there are professionals like you that actually advise those who have funds or are in the right position, and then makes it really hard for everyone who doesn't have that opportunities. And
see what you mean. Well, I guess that's why universities are also trying to create these departments that would be helping within a university, and will be and that's paid by the university. You know, the grant advice within the university is free for researchers. In this sense, I guess it's really good indeed that these opportunities are created now. And in general, the fact that there are more and more people who are professional writers, I think it's actually good. It's kind of like this, the research work is becoming more and more diversified. Instead of doing everything on your own and being good in everything, you can actually delegate part of your work to someone who is doing this professionally. Mm-hmm. And I think it will be the way that, I hope that this will be the way that research world is developing.
Okay. All right. So what advice would you have to those who are considering grant advisory? So yeah, how to possibly find options for themselves. And maybe since you were mentioning a few times already that there are different types of grant writing, maybe it would be good to also revise what options and what are these different these different schemes in which you can do grant advisory. Since you were mentioning that, but maybe for people who first heard about grant advisory today, maybe it would be good to review what are these different forms of grant advisory.
Yeah, sure. So you may work at the university, and I think in the Netherlands, at least, big universities now, all of them have grant support of offices or grant offices. That's one option. The other option is a consultancy agency, and there are several big agencies also in the Netherlands that usually hire people after PhD. That's possible. There are options for freelance work. There are options for work within more in a collaboration with industry. So there are all this. I think I listed. Maybe I forgot something, but this would be the main options where to find for such a job. But it's also, as I said, it's good to realize. Also, just like big research structures, like for instance KNFA or this RVO in the Netherlands. They also have their own grant advice desks, so that's also a place to look at. It's also important that you may do very different work in all those different places, and the work may range from actually writing grants, to advising on strategies and collaborations, and with all possibilities in between. So it's good to see what actually you want to do.
Mm-hmm. And do you sometimes miss those times when you were sitting behind your computer and programming? And
no.
Quiet? Actually, I'm
No.
asking because I normally don't like programming. During my PhD, it was always driving me nuts. I liked everything else except for programming. But now, once I have to do a lot for the company, like I have to take care of the website, of the clients, of the communications, of the social media, of creating new products, and I have to do all that. And sometimes, once in a while, I just have to program something. For instance, a piece of backend for the website of the company, and then actually I start liking it, because these are the few hours during the day when no one bothers me, and I just can focus on one thing. So you don't have those days when you actually miss your PhD times?
Well, I don't miss programming particularly, or like I still do have at least one research project that I'm finalizing with my collaborators at the Donders, which I do enjoy doing that. Actually reading and bringing yeah, writing articles that I can say that I miss it, but I'm still doing it for this other job. So no, I don't miss the research job.
Oh,
It's good
well,
I said it.
yeah, good to hear. I mean, I think for those who think about switching to industry and they are not decided yet, I think it's a good news to know that you don't have any regrets and any afterthoughts about your transition. That's great. All right, so like, let me ask you this cheesy question that often comes in job interviews, which is, how do you see yourself in the future? So, do you have some picture of yourself in 5 years from now, and do you see yourself still as grant advisor, or is it an open question?
Thanks for this question. I just started a new job that is also grant advice, but then in a more public-private collaboration, and also in this topic of health nutrition in behaviors that I really like, that is close to my interests. So I actually see myself developing in that job. That is pretty easy, and I haven't thought further yet.
Okay, well, I was just curious. But I guess it's probably is a good mindset, right? Just do what you enjoy and don't think too much about the future. Just to create a network, make sure that you meet new people along the way. And yeah, if it's good, if it feels good, then what's the problem, right? So actually, this is also a problem that we often have in academia, that we are pushed to plan ahead because we know that there will be the end of the road at some point, and at one point in time our contract will be expired. So we are forced to always think about, okay, what is my next step, and then I can also see that it's hard to sometimes get rid of this feeling and just accept that things are good, and that, yeah, I just enjoy my job and I don't have to be worried anymore. So
No, yeah, my current contract is also not permanent, so I do have an end date. On the other hand, I learned that I have to work. I don't want to set goals for myself, and it's like a yoga approach. You work on what you have now in front of you without thinking about the end result, even though you may have this end result in mind as a dream, or sort of an ideal situation. But if you're focusing too much on that, then it drives your attention away from the present moment. And in the present moment, I have an intention, like what I want to do now, what I can learn, what I can do better. And I know where I am heading. So I'm kind of focusing on the present moment. And I think that helps also to make decisions. That's just what helps me to make decisions.
yeah, it might have a lot to do with yoga. That's very yoga style mindset,
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah, actually, I tried to do yoga when I was in high school, but I was never patient enough. And I have to say, I'm very bad at meditating and yoga and everything that requires sitting still. Um, Good for you. It's probably better for your mental health that you can do it.
So I'm now I teach just one class a week right now, but I also teach. I have several nice and interesting projects with yoga. For example, I am contributing in a teacher training for healthcare professionals it's in Amsterdam, but it's actually around the entire country. We have doctors, physiotherapists, psychologists, so healthcare professionals who want to learn more about yoga and integrate yogic tools in their practice. So we are doing a yoga teacher training for this group of people, and I offer scientific course within this yoga teacher training, and this is really interesting. I enjoy this a lot.
Oh, that's amazing. Scientific training. Yeah, I always admire people who can just put together two apparently disconnected pieces and just make it work. Actually, last week I was talking here at this channel with Matthias Hombauer, who put together music and photography. and became a concert photographer. That was two of his passions, and he just decided to put them together. And now, actually, in the crisis, he couldn't do the concert photography anymore. So he decided that since his biggest passion is his kids, and building businesses, then he became a dadpreneur. So he created a mastermind group for dads who have businesses, and he's like very good with actually putting together some pieces that yeah, and creating some niche for himself. So yeah, if you can do that, like do science and do yoga at the same time, then great. That must be hard, but sounds ambitious.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. And as I said, you know, I'm focusing on what I have now, and these projects are intervened in many ways, although these are still two separate jobs, and maybe one day I can blend them together in the one job. I don't know yet.
Mm.
But I'm very content with how these things are going now. And thanks for offering. I will watch this other episode. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, who knows? Maybe there will be some grant calls for projects about meditation and yoga. Who knows?
Of course, that exists. And as I said, I looked into these possibilities. I had an idea in mind, like what could be an interesting research. But then I realized that I feel very excited about writing it up, you know, and making this proposal and talking about it. But when I think about actually getting these funds, you know, and starting actually doing the research work,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel this excitement anymore. And at that point, I thought that maybe that's just not my path. Maybe I just stay here with, you know, working with ideas and helping people to get their ideas running, and then we'll see how yoga incorporates in that.
And could I, as a last question, could I ask you for some general advice you might have for PhDs who are wondering about their options outside academia?
I think my first advice is that it's okay to wonder, you know, that it's just okay to take your time if you have such a possibility, to take your time to actually think what you want to do. It's okay to say no to things if you feel like you don't really something that you don't want to do, even if it's feels scary to say no because you don't know if there are other options. Yeah, and it is good to think about what you want to do in terms of what are your values, what you actually want to bring. It might sound very big, but it's about what do you want to bring to the world and how do you want to feel, and then you start from there and looking for something that fits you. And actually talking to a career advisor, it's good, it never hurts.
Indeed, I can confirm. Never hurts. Great. Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much, Irina, for sharing your story and for telling us all the secrets about working as a grant advisor at the university. Thank you so much for joining us, and also for everyone who is watching us right now. If you guys would like to get more of this type of content, then please subscribe to this channel, and also we are welcoming all your questions. We'll attempt to answer all of them. So if you have any questions for Irina, you can ask here, or you can also contact her on LinkedIn, I guess, right?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do that. And have a nice day. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thanks, Natalia.